Good afternoon. This is my 17th Singularity event, just so I can calibrate. For whom in the audience is it your first? Oh yeah, I remember that one. Pretty much blows your mind. What happens is, I think, for most of you, you start to realize you haven't been paying nearly enough attention to the way in which life is changing all around you. If you're not lucky, this will make you feel really, really bad by the end of the conference. You're going to start feeling like a complete screw-up, okay? And I don't think that that's actually helpful. Nobody ever innovates when they're afraid of the future. So what I'm going to try to do in the next few minutes is give you a sense of what it means to get innovation to actually occur, even though most of the things that are happening at a rate you cannot possibly be expected to personally keep track of, and are happening in too many types, too many varieties for you to have anywhere near enough time or peripheral vision to have enough curiosity about all those things that are now possible. What do you do in that condition? Well, about the cruelest thing we do to smart people is to stick them in a room and say, okay, innovate now, like you couldn't do it yesterday. But now that I'm standing in front of you and yelling at you, somehow you've just been transformed overnight into a great innovator. You've had this experience, right? Somebody stands in front of you and tells you, we need more ideas. And they start hectoring you and telling you that with all this talent in the room, between now and dinner time, don't you think we could generate 473 ideas? 922 ideas? 1,647 ideas? We could, couldn't we? What then happens with all those ideas, ladies and gentlemen? Pretty much nothing. Some poor schmo has to type them up, which is pretty much impossible because they're scribbled on flip charts that you can no longer read, layered with Post-it notes that you have no idea the context for. And after that, somebody circulates all those typewritten notes and asks, how many of these are associated with our strategic priorities? This sounds really important, but nobody's ever known how to do it. So for 35 years, I've been a scientist of innovation. I've tried to figure out what makes it work and what makes it fail. One of the things that I can tell you for sure is that what people tend to believe is mostly myth and desperately needs to be replaced with method. People have an extraordinary amount of lore that they believe about innovation, and it desperately needs logic instead. How many of you remember this guy from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? That's Caractacus T. Potts, right? The guy that made the car that could fly. This is what we believe about innovation. We believe innovation comes from geniuses and gadflies and rocket scientists and people fueled with illicit substances of various kinds, mavericks of all sorts. Okay? That's what we believe. And I'm here to tell you that's wrong. Desperately, dangerously wrong. And when you learn to get innovation to give up its secrets, you can have a chance of surfing these extraordinary exponential trends that you've been hearing about, the abundance that Peter Diamandis talked about yesterday, the extraordinary opportunities to transform life for average citizens all throughout the continent of Africa, and centered in many cases right here in South Africa, one of the most extraordinary hubs in the world for talent, opportunity, capital, and a sense of possibilities, okay? Let's see if we can figure that out. Well, let me tell you one of the main things that screws up the average team when they try to innovate. They don't sort out two different things. They sort of have a sense of what innovation is, or at least they ask each other that as the very first question, and understanding that is really crucial. So there's a noun form. What on earth are we going to try to make, right? That's the thing we're going to make. And in most people's instances, they think it's supposed to be a product. By the way, if that's your starting place, lay down until the feeling goes away. That's actually dangerous, okay? The second problem is most people have no clue how to innovate. That's the verb form, right? Innovation, noun form, innovating, verb form. And you never get it to work unless and until you're working on the right things and you're working on them in the right ways. And guess what? Almost everybody screws that up. It's not their fault. They paid attention to things like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and other things that are just filled with nonsense. And it's really fun to learn how to get innovation to actually work, and it's dramatically more likely to succeed. So these are the things that I'm going to talk about for a few minutes. And the reason I'm going to talk about them is because every team, every project that you're going to work on will benefit from your ability to not only be excited about the possibilities that an exponentially changing world brings, but will especially be thrilling for you if you're able to harness those possibilities with effective innovation techniques. And that's been the work that I've done for 35 years. Now, I've broken this down for you into 2 bite-sized nuggets. This is the first, how you innovate in ways that are likely to succeed instead of fail. The second part, I'll just show you a little egg now, a little tease. I'm going to talk about how you focus on the right things. So how do you focus on the right ways? How do you focus on the right things? Those are the 2 things that most teams screw up. So I know Uber is extraordinarily popular here in Johannesburg and throughout Africa. I've been using it since I've been here. It's been fun. I've been interviewing all the Uber drivers about how they feel. How many of you are fans of Uber, just so I can calibrate? Yep, okay, terrific. Very helpful. That's most of the audience. And the reasons are always the same when I ask people what are the reasons. It's simple. I know who the driver's name is. I have some theory about when the driver will arrive. I'm confident that they'll find me. The transaction is easy. I can tell how long the trip's going to take. All kinds of things that are really exceptional. And what is interesting to me when I ask people what they like about Uber, the answers that they give me are always sort of offered up from this point of view of the users. From the point of view of the developers, what's interesting is that mostly what they're leveraging is the fact that they assumed you already have a supercomputer in your purse or pocket. They made a really big assumption about how the users could, in fact, engage the service and have harnessed most of the technical functionality of these devices in an elegant way. But what almost nobody cites when I ask them what they like about Uber is some of my favorite things, specifically that everywhere in the world where Uber is practicing, about 176 countries so far, it dramatically changes employment practices. People can essentially hire themselves into this job. In the old days, you had to bring a car and it had to meet their standards. Nowadays, Uber will finance that for you. And they do things that make governments everywhere grateful for the service because it helps to create jobs for people that might not have credentialing, might not know the local language, the local culture as well as some others, and might otherwise have a great deal of difficulty getting employed. And how does all that happen? Right now, I'd like you to imagine that each of the 1,300 members of our audience is the manager of a city for Uber. The power structure in Uber is focused at the city level. Okay, so for individual cities, each of you could decide what you want to do to get Uber to function well in that city. And when I teach this in business schools, we have to make it sound really complicated and sophisticated. Otherwise, the students don't feel like they're getting their money's worth for the tuition we're hosing them for. So I describe this as a bilateral business ecosystem where you have to attract drivers on the one side and customers or passengers on the other side, right? People buying lunch sometimes, all kinds of new services. And your buttons on your interface are the way each of you in your room, would get the system to work well in your city. And you would have perhaps several dozen, maybe even more than 100 or 200 programmers working for you. And any of those programmers could try any button they want, buttons to attract more drivers, buttons to teach the customers how they can order a meal through Uber Eats or something else. And all of those experiments happen with no central control. Anytime any of you want to try a new button, you have the absolute freedom to do it. But here's the thing. Within seconds of it being attached to the interface in your city, Atlassian HipChat will begin to report on its progress. How well is it delivering on what it's supposed to do? And if it climbs to the top of the Uber hit list today, your button, the new thing you did this morning, will start to get attraction amongst all the other 1,299 people in the room. And they'll start to say, geez, dude, where's the code for that button? That's amazing. I've got that same problem in my city. And that's the way the actual progress is made. It's a system with no center, lots of experimentation, deep discipline, rapid feedback. Now let me reveal unto you the entire tech stack of Uber. Not one bit of it is proprietary. Any of you can build a service like Uber later this same day simply by licensing these well-known, well-understood capabilities from companies like PayPal and Amazon and others, and stitch those in a way that's robust and reliable and unlikely to be hacked, because these are things that have been stabilized in lots of different applications around the world. And I find that kind of amazing and unprecedented. The ability to build complicated, sophisticated things that you don't have to understand simply because you're paying attention to the capabilities, the Lego building bricks, and what's called your stack, your tech stack, that makes your business function. Let me give you another example so that we can all get the full fruity flavor of this. Airbnb hasn't been around for very long, right? So it only was founded in 2008. And by 2016, 8 years later, it managed to pass, look at this, the 3 largest global hotel chains combined. Unbelievable, 2.3 million rooms in inventory. So how do you build the world's biggest hotel chain in 6 years without any hotel rooms? Okay, kind of a cool puzzle, right? And the way you do it is by using this tech stack, okay? So there's 20 application and data capabilities, there's 16 DevOps capabilities, 13 utilities, and 8 business tools. That's how you build it. And the question is, well, are any of those proprietary to Airbnb? Well, a couple, a little bit. You could get around them. You could do those things other ways, but let me now reveal unto you those, okay? Out of the 20 application and data, 1. Out of the 16 DevOps, 2. Out of the 13 utilities, 3. And out of the 8 business tools, exactly 1. What that means is fundamentally 7 of the 57 apps in the tech stack for the world's biggest hotel company are completely available to you. You could license them later this same day. Anybody else getting excited about this? Is this getting you tingly all over? You don't actually have to understand very much today. You have to decide that something is important. You have to get the sense that there are problems you have to break it down into. And then you have to ask yourself very simply, when in the course of human events, has anybody ever solved that class of problem before? And what little cool utility can I buy, stitch in, and make useful for me and the problem I'm trying to solve? The way I like to describe this is that in the modern world, 21st century innovation is much more about the elegant integration of well-known things than it is about the primary invention of brand new things. Just think about that for a second. If you're getting freaked out by this idea of exponential change, the comforting sort of counterpoint to it is you too can build something amazing as long as you're focused on the misery or the need or the scarcity that actually needs to be solved. This is why there is no reason, fundamentally no structural reason why individuals, teams, companies, and I'm going to dream a little bit here, government leaders all throughout the African continent can't become some of the best leaders of innovation soon. We see this everywhere. Hold up your Android or iOS device and stare at it for a moment. What you're going to discover is there really are more than 1.5 million apps for those devices. By the way, nobody needs 1.5 million apps. You get even a small fraction of that, your life comes to a crashing halt, right? So we hear about the cool ones from our buddies. We put those into our devices, and from that point on, they're self-organizing and self-optimizing. They keep track of all the times they crash everywhere in the world with millions of people using them. Those little reports go to the development teams. They get the chance to fix them. That's the world of asset-light capabilities. They're fast, they're smart, they're distributed, they're open, porous, they're rated. This is the modern world, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about creating useful bits and then combining those useful bits into something surprising. Now, as you heard, I wrote a book about this, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it, to be honest, because I spent way too much time and money writing my book, 5 years, and nobody reads books anymore, okay? This was explained to me by one of my very own social scientists, a brilliant cultural anthropologist. She was walking down past me in my office one day. She says, "How's that book thing coming?" And I thought she was sincere, so I tried to give her an answer. I said, you know, the data in chapter 14 is just kicking my ass. And she wasn't actually interested. She was using her phone to do something. And she passed me and said, yeah, you know, nobody reads books anymore, right? And I go, oh, damn. That's why you hire anthropologists, ladies and gentlemen. They tell you what human beings actually do. It's a really big and important thing. The mission of the book was to try to distill what's known now about how to make innovation succeed instead of fail. But this is not a sales pitch for the book. In fact, to discourage you from thinking that you should read it, or better yet, what most companies do is use it as a prop. Welcome to our company. These are our beliefs. Here are our props. That's what people do to decorate their corporate offices. Sometimes useful if you have one of those, you know, coffee tables that mysteriously levitates. This book is heavy enough to weight that sucker down. But for the rest of you that are actually trying to innovate, let me give you now the critical mission of the book. Inside of the book, one of the things that we did, a team of us at Dublin, now 21 years ago, was we said, what innovations in history have ever changed the world? And we gathered up a bunch over a 200-year time frame. And the things we were gathering were things that had changed categories, changed industries, changed the world. And we asked the question, do they have anything in common? So we were comparing things like Henry Ford's Model T Ford from 1908 to Cirque du Soleil circuses, which at the time were brand new. And our hypothesis was that they would have nothing in common, nothing whatsoever. So we were as shocked as anybody else when our great methodologist, Vijay Kumar, was able to stick all these things into computers and distill them down and discover, to our utter astonishment, that there are now, and wait for it because this is the cool bit, there have always been 10 distinct types of innovation that people can use as Lego building bricks, as levers, effectively. Now, color at Dublin is never random and never decorative. So when you see that stuff in blue, it's taught mostly in business schools. That stuff in gold in the middle, taught mostly in engineering schools, and the stuff over there in red, taught to social scientists or designers. And think about the last time you had a meeting with a big team. Were all those people like really in the boat together, pulling on the oars? Were the senior executives, educated at the best business schools in the world, politely waiting for everybody else to speak? Or were they saying, no, these are our priorities, and this innovation gets to live, that one gets to die. This is not, you guys got this all wrong, that kind of stuff? And you know how the engineers behave, right? They're sitting in their room with their, oh man, nobody understands what's going on here. I'm the guy that understands. This too shall pass. And when this meeting is over, I'll just go back to doing whatever the hell I feel like, because that's how progress is really. And then there's the designers, right? Happy puppy dogs going, oh, I can make a prototype about that. That'd be fun. We can make it really, really cool. And what about a brand name for that? That would be good too, right? So that's why the meetings are a little surreal and not so productive. When you learn to break down those social problems, what you get is the ability to come up with, and this is simple, bolder ideas that are easier for you to implement because you can tell what they actually need in order to succeed, and they're harder for others to copy because they're sophisticated. This is how you make sophisticated innovations that actually work. Now, that's just one tool in the modern innovator's toolbox, and I don't want to bore you with this, but if you're going to get an advanced innovation degree, and it's possible to get master's degrees, doctorate degrees, and postdoctoral degrees in innovation and innovation sciences, you probably need to become familiar with about 70 such tools. And what I've done for you here is to sneeze onto the screen the 10 or so that matter most if you're going to get your company to be successful at innovating. And I'm not going to bore you with these because, frankly, you know, it usually takes several weeks to teach these things, and we charge people thousands of dollars for it. Not me, but the schools I teach at, right? And if I could figure out how to give it to you for free in 2 minutes, I cheerfully would. But then I'm really hosing those other people. So here's the deal. Just one of those tools is the opposite of brainstorming. It's called a platform construction toolkit. I believe brainstorming is a carcinogen. I think surgeons generals the world over should get around to regulating it, but you know, people still do it pretty much every time. And this is the opposite of that. Put a team in a room with this tool, somewhat customized perhaps for your firm, your industry, or your problem, and in about a half a day, instead of generating hundreds of ideas, that team will come up with one along with tactics about how to build it, along with strategies about how to make it cheap and disruptive, and along with a business model specifically planned for time staging it over time, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4 if necessary. And oh, by the way, we became part of Deloitte 5 years ago. The meetings were long and surreal, but we convinced Deloitte to give that away for free. So again, this is not a sales pitch. If you're able to get access to an American or several other countries, I don't know if South Africa is one of them, iTunes address, you can download the 10 Types of Innovation app for free and learn how to build stuff, badass breakthrough innovations, and do it all with integrated little lessons about how to make sense of these things. So that's a light version of the technology I was trying to tell you about, but here's the cool bit. When you learn that there is technology for innovation, that innovation for the first time in history is giving up its secrets, what you discover is that there's some fundamental things, just absolutely basic things, such as the things you see here. Tradecraft that helps you innovate reliably instead of badly, diagnostics so you can tell your starting condition, some center of excellence so you have a handful of people that have been trained in innovation and know how to teach the others. Never centralize innovation, but do have a few people that actually know how to do it and have a mission for what you're trying to do. What makes it better than that is the ability to have some sense of what's changing over time. And if there's nothing else that's happened to you over the last 24 hours and soon to be 40 hours or so, you've been sheep-dipped into a whole bunch of things that are pretty cool innovation themes. The next thing you should do after that is build really great platforms, and after that, create lightweight innovation, clouds, crowds, partners, and prizes to make your innovation a fraction of the cost of what it used to take in the old days 2 years ago, and then try to figure out what you do to get a sense of how the ecosystem you're participating in is going to shift. If you actually want to do even better than that, what you then do is put metrics, incentives, and rewards. You teach your top leaders to sponsor innovation. You give your very high potential young people a chance to be the authors of innovation, and that turns into something great. If you don't know anything about what I've just been talking about, the normal, average, global success rate for innovation is fewer than 5% of the things you try to produce will in fact return your cost of capital. That's the global norm. Some industries are marginally better, some industries are significantly worse. There's a bell curve, of course, but it all balances around this idea of 5 out of every 100 projects will succeed. Do that stuff at the bottom, your new success rate is 35%. Do that stuff in the middle, you get a hit rate of about 50%. At that point, you got an invention machine. If half the ideas you can focus on are likely to succeed instead of fail, that's pretty cool. And if you add the stuff at the top inside of companies of scale, you'll tend to get a success rate around 70%. Those of you taking photographs of the slides, you're more than welcome to, but I posted them for you on a secure website because I'm not trying to be coy with this information. Okay? I will reveal that unto you shortly. So here's the thing. This is our evidence that innovation for the first time in history is giving up its secrets. You too can do it. You don't have to be afraid of the future. No one ever does very well by being afraid of the future. It's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is so inspiring to all of us. So I'm going to just take a couple of minutes and talk to you now about how, once I've teased you with the idea that there are superior ways to innovate, there's also superior things to focus on, things that are simply more important, more gnarly, more substantive. And you've been hearing about a lot of those, especially in today's sessions. You know, the idea of solving water problems and solving power problems and solving transportation problems. Now, the heart of it is, of course, thinking about platforms. And when I was a kid, that's what platforms consisted of, but they've changed a little bit through the years, okay? And for those of you trying to recognize them, those were the shoes Elton John wore in the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road Tour, 1970. Okay, nobody cares. What's important is that platforms are actually the way in a connected world that you truly get leverage. These are the most popular consumer platforms in the world. Show of hands, how many of you use at least 3 of those every day? Everybody in the audience, that's what I predicted. Least valuable of these is worth about 10 billion US dollars. The most valuable, well over 40 billion US dollars. And these are the most valuable consumer platforms in the world. You cannot escape these suckers. You use them every day, you just don't know it when you're doing it. And the least valuable is worth about 15 billion US dollars, and they range to well over 400 billion US dollars in terms of the valuation of those technologies and those capabilities. Imagine that. Learning to focus on things that matter pays off. What you do to get that to happen is you think about what your platform is going to do. How are you going to make it easy for people to do hard things? That almost always involves harnessing some technology, but then adding an elegant little business model and creating a really terrific experience. Think about that as sort of an example that we all know as music streaming, right? I used to own thousands, I still own technically 33,000 songs in my iTunes music collection. But you know what I do? Now I just pay $9.95 and I get millions of songs. And I'm going to plug in albums or genres or artists that I like, and on the basis of the fact that millions of strangers I don't ever expect to meet are listening to some of those same things, the system will be making recommendations for me. And it's likely to be right. That is an example of an elegant few capabilities, very simple really, plus a great price that feels fair, plus a terrific experience, so I learn about music I'm likely to like with greater efficiency than ever before. There are lots of things that have been done in this region of the world that are mega innovation experiments, okay? And you remember when we had a president with functioning brain cells? He did some of those. And that was cool. But that's not what I want to talk about for the last couple of seconds that I have with you. I want to talk about really practical things, simple things with the power to change the world. I already talked to you about Airbnb, but now I want to reveal to you what they're actually doing. It's 5 types of innovation and all 3 colors. The rule of thumb, you want to change the world, you have to be using at least 5 types of innovation and all 3 colors. The thing that usually makes the biggest difference is changing the profit model way over there on the left and the experience or customer engagement model way over on the right. That's what matters. Threadless, some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not. This was done by some students of mine. First fashion company in history that's never lost money on a single item, ever. That's unheard of. Good fashion companies only expect to make profits on about 13% of individual items. How'd they do that? Well, all they make is T-shirts. And anybody in the world can substitute a T-shirt, can contribute a T-shirt design. And they leave it out there on the web to cook. 2 buttons. I like this T-shirt, or I would buy this T-shirt. And they don't even have a sophisticated algorithm. It's like a macro on an Excel spreadsheet. At the end of the week, they look and say, how many of those T-shirt ideas we got this week had at least 40,000 I would buy it votes? I said, I got an idea. Why don't we put those T-shirts into production? And then they send a little email saying, that T-shirt you liked, it's available. You want to buy it? Click here. I don't know how to tell you how simple that idea is, okay? And yet it's the most successful fashion company in history measured by return on cost. Etsy has made it possible for everybody in the hobby business to find an easy route to market with 7 types of innovation. Kiva, as you know, has been very successful in getting microloans to scale in interesting and surprising ways and adding more and more sophisticated capabilities over time, like loan matching and corporate partnerships. This is Wangari Maathai. I love her work. She got an actual Nobel Prize. Let me just take a quick calibration. How many in the audience have an actual Nobel Prize? Yeah, me either. So hats off to her then, right? Her ability to figure out how to create a green belt movement driven by women here in Africa is inspiring to me and to my daughters and to everybody that I know. Kickstart, focused in Kenya, has a very simple model of creating treadle pumps. People come and visit the treadle pumps and hear the story in the dealerships about why they should spend the $37 to get them. This is their simple model and how it works. But the interesting thing is it's had enough economic impact in Kenya to create about 8% of GDP. That would be the equivalent in the US of Microsoft and IBM combined. And they did it with 8 types of innovation orchestrated this way. Okay? Kind of nice, very simple pump, easy to repair, designed with them and for them by IDEO. M-Pesa, similar to what we have in mobile money in this area, is radically altering the ways in which farmers can, for the first time ever, have power. I've just harvested my chickpeas. I've just harvested my cassava root. Now I need a donkey. I'm going to bring it to a market. I bring it to the market in the old days, 3 years ago. It's not looking so good. People are waiting for it to look even worse. They're telling me what price they'll pay. The price keeps going down and down and down. I'm watching my family suffer every moment. Now, before I harvest it, I figure out who wants it, what market to bring it to. Only then do I get the donkey, and I've already negotiated the price and been paid for it. Farmers have power. Right after that happens, their daughters show up and say, "Daddy, can you get me the concert tickets that I need?" And that's what caused them to have a whole bunch of other services. 8 types of innovation, radical impact. And this one is completely stealable, and you should do it in lots of different parts of this nation and of the other countries in the continent. PMQ is a creative industries region in Hong Kong. And what they've done is they've allowed young people to come and build things there and have the local things get selected by the design community and featured, and then get Kickstarter-like microloans to fund them. And after they've been selected, they often get featured in the Cube, it's called, where people get to put on events. And at that point, they're part of the winning product showcase, a claim they can make forever. And that turns out to be the way people with no resources get terrific support in the early stages and start to mainstream their ideas and get marketplaces for them. So ladies and gentlemen, the point that I've been making to you is that today's world is weirder than it's ever been. If you have an idea filled with your brain and your heart, there are modules that you can build it from. There are strategies you can build it with. And if you're very clever, you'll find the interesting, simple, bite-sized nuggets that make your idea robust. And if you're very clever indeed, you'll create the kinds of ideas like Airbnb, like Uber, that go on to become ecosystems of their own right. They then act like a coral reef, a system with no center. Think about it for a second. Tens of thousands of diverse species arrive at the coral reef. Nobody has to organize anything. They don't have to have meetings. Hey, fish, this part of the reef over here needs some cleaning up. There's no staff meetings. And yet the coral reef manages itself with extraordinary sophistication. This is the world we're in now. It's a world that should not be causing you fear, but incredible excitement. An incredible excitement that's born of the recognition that while God may have made this world, that's no excuse for us not to make it better. That starts with each of you, your teams, and your ability to produce something deeply relevant to your family, to your friends, to the people in your community, and the people that you will never meet whose lives you can change. When you do it right, innovation is the hardest work you will ever love. And if you want these notes, you go to clientweb.doblin.com. It's going to ask you for an event code, SU space SA Innovation. Yes, this is the slide you should take a photo of. That's what all the cool kids do. And I answer all my emails personally. Okay? So thank you very much for the chance to be with you today.
Wow. Brilliant, inspiring, mind-blowing. Thank you.
Well, you say that to everybody.
No, you did blow my mind. All right, guys, Q&A time. I know there must be some hands ready to come up. Who has a question? Well, I guess I want to know, how'd you become like this? How'd you become such a pattern thinker? I mean, to hear you talk, the stream of consciousness is just mind-blowing.
Well, it's a sweet question, very generous. You're giving me more credit than I deserve. I paid a lot of attention to how people screw it up, okay? I just gathered up all the failures and kept making patterns out of that, right? Yeah. Same as forensic scientists everywhere. You think about when doctors kill a patient, they didn't mean to, right? They had all kinds of equipment laying around. Everybody was there, dressed up, and the patient ended up dead. And in medicine, they do a really good job of figuring that out. What do we do in innovation? Well, we make sure that nobody ever mentions that they worked on that project on their resume. We just like it's like history in Russia. It just disappears. And the thought is that you can learn a lot by finding patterns of failure and trying to not get those to keep going on.
Right. We've got a question over here at fourth row middle.
How do we help entrepreneurs across the globe to identify all these platforms and capabilities so that we can quickly integrate them in new ways and create new innovation? Is there a repository of capabilities that we can start drawing on to create new worlds?
Yes, so write these 3 down. Hadoop, GitHub, StackShare, okay? Those are what young people everywhere start out with. If I'm a young person and I'm trying to build something, I'm going to look in Hadoop, I'm going to look in Hadoop rather, GitHub, and StackShare to figure out who's already built something like that. You will even discover by checking with a teenager near you that there are things called Arduino boards and Raspberry Pis, dirt cheap, prototyping capabilities that you can get close to for free, and then you'll discover 20, 30, 40,000 pre-existing routines to get them to do things. Young people today, when it comes time to build something, they never say, let's go build it. They start by saying, well, who's got the bits and pieces we need that do all those hard things that otherwise I'd have to use my brain for? That's too much work. And if your kids are anything like mine, they were raised on Lego building bricks. None of this seems hard to them. It just seems like how it's done. And if you just start realizing the Lego building bricks are just cooler than ever before, more abundant than ever before, and with all kinds of magic properties. It's the same exact idea that was created 44 years ago by one guy sitting all by himself in a room, Alan Kay, who realized that programming was hard and that lots of things were going to need software and that we were going to constrain the whole world's progress if we didn't find a better way to do it. He called it object-oriented programming, and it was Alan Kay sitting in Palo Alto Research Center. That simple idea has gone on to make a watershed change in how we build things. And all your young people in your families know this already. They may not know it consciously. They may not know the 3 places I just told you to go to, but they know it experientially. It's how they do.
One more question. All right, we've got a hand over here about 5th row. Can you stand up, please?
Thanks.
Thanks.
We've got an organization called the Film and Publications Board. And what they do is they stop us from reading books. And it came to mind when you said, have you got a US account? Because then you can download my book. And my question to you, do you have countries that have got examples, that have got rid of these organizations so we can read whatever we need to read to become progressive?
Well, let's be clear. You can download my book anywhere. Not that I'm recommending that, mind you. And it has been translated into 17 languages, so you can probably get it in a language that you're comfortable with. But again, what I said was a constraint was downloading the free app that allows you to do complicated, sophisticated innovation. And we're trying to get that to get cleared up. It's an issue between Deloitte's negotiating and Apple's negotiating. I think it actually is available in about 6 countries now. I just don't remember exactly which ones because I'm getting old. Okay? So.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. To be fair about your question, almost every industry and almost every nation benefits from smart repositories of things that are well known and creating resource assets that allow anybody trying to do anything to not have to go hunting for it personally. And that is one of the things that tends to happen in innovation hubs, is people create a smart repository so that young people scampering about trying to get something useful to happen don't have to waste a lot of time going to figure out what the best resources are. And I think that's the heart of what you were asking. Thank you very much. Jason,
thank you very much. Thank you, guys.